Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of the Daily Gwei Refuel, where we recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 8th of November, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So I put out a tweet yesterday, and this was after I put out yesterday's refuel, where I said, been thinking a lot lately about what we are actually building in crypto and who are we actually building it for. What value are we bringing, who have we helped so far, where to from here, and I said that I'd give my long form thoughts on this on today's episode. Now I want to spend probably the next 10 minutes or so talking about this, so if you're not interested in my thoughts here, you can just skip along. There's a bunch of other things I'll be covering, obviously, in today's episode, but I think this is quite an important thing to talk about, at least like at this stage of the market where I guess we're in like the transition phase from the bear crab to the bull market, where things are getting a bit noisier but still relatively quiet, but we stand to be welcoming a bunch of new people into the ecosystem as the bull market spins up again. Now, obviously, most of these people are only coming to make a quick buck, which is totally fine, nothing wrong with that. But I think that for those of us who have been around for a while, I mean, for me, it's been over 10 years since I first got into crypto in 2013, I find myself, especially over the last few months, asking, what are we building here? Like, who are we building it for? What are we actually doing? Where's the value not only accruing, but where's the value actually being had for everyday people? I did mention on Twitter the other day that networks like Tron, for example, that no one even really talks about, are delivering a ton of value to people through stablecoins, right? But like, where's the other value? And this is something that I wanted to explore today. Now, first off, we can kind of pick the obvious kind of use cases of crypto here, the obvious things that are driving a lot of value for a lot of people around the world. The first thing, and I believe this is still crypto's best product market fit, is non-sovereign or self-sovereign, or I guess like non-nation state money. Like, that is obviously what Bitcoin was created to be. ETH is also that to me as well. And people will argue their favorite coin is that, but I think in terms of just like general acceptability and market cap and size and all that, BTC and ETH are that, right? It's money that exists outside of nation state control. It is not controlled by like a Federal Reserve or anything like that, and people are comfortable storing their value in BTC and ETH as well as using them as some form of money. Now, of course, neither BTC or ETH are good money for obvious reasons, but people still use them as money. They use it as a store of value. They're comfortable storing their value in these assets for long periods of time. That to me is still the number one use case of blockchains, to be honest, because without blockchains, without a decentralized network, you cannot achieve that, because there would always be a centralized coordinator, and that would just recreate the existing system we have today with the fiat systems, right? So the whole point of these kind of assets being on a decentralized network is that no one can control them. Obviously, I mean, that's obvious to us within crypto. I think the second biggest use case, and one that obviously is not a decentralized use case, most of it is very centralized, is just stablecoins, right? US dollar stablecoins in particular. They are used by so many people. I mean, outside of BTC and ETH, they would have to be the tokens that are used by far the most, right? Not just for obviously people storing maybe their savings in it and then like getting a yield on those stable coins, but also transacting in them, paying for things in them, using them as money, obviously, stuff like that. And especially using it at other parts of the world, not just the West. I talked the other day, as I said, about Tron and how people in South America are using it, how people in and other places like Asia are using it on BSC, Africa, all those kinds of places, right? And that's basically the second biggest product within crypto, I think. It could even be the biggest, to be honest, but in terms of like the biggest, in terms of what's actively used, I think stablecoins would be the biggest. But in terms of the biggest kind of, I guess if you want to call store of value a product, that is definitely still bigger if you count BTC and ETH as the stores of value and people are storing their value in it. I think that's definitely bigger there. And then you basically from there can go down the list of things. The next obvious one to me is DeFi, right? Building a decentralized, distributed, permissionless, open financial system for the world, built on protocols, built on code, not built on a kind of like just people pulling the strings, not built on the banks as we know them today, not built the way the traditional finance system is built, right? Just a new way to do to transact with each other through stablecoins, a new way to trade with each other through things like AMMs, like Uniswap, right? A new way to borrow and lend money, all those sorts of things, right? That kind of fall under the DeFi umbrella here. And I think, as I said before, DeFi is a kind of A term that is probably I have a love-hate relationship with, because most of DeFi is not decentralized, and I don't think it materially ever will be. But I think that's okay, because really the innovation is on-chain finance, just basically recreating the rails for financial applications, and updating them to the modern age, to the digital age, so that they're global first, right? They're based on a network that is decentralized and secure and credibly neutral, all those different properties that I've discussed before. So those kind of three use cases that I mentioned are like the top ones, the most obvious ones. And then from there, you get the long tail. And I say the long tail because I don't really think anything else in crypto has product market fit, if I'm being honest. And you could say stablecoins fall into DeFi as well, but I think that I like to split those things out because of the fact that when I think of DeFi, I don't just think of like a token, for example, or like a stablecoin. I think of the actual infrastructure, the actual financial infrastructure that is being built, like Uniswap, like Aave, like Maker, all those different apps. That's what I think of when I think of DeFi. And then stablecoins are definitely distinctly different from that. And then obviously stores of value, money, BTC and ETH are distinctly different from that. But then the long tail comes into it, where we have things like NFTs, crypto gaming, social finance, all these things, but they're all very, very small still. They're all very, very niche. They're not exactly things that I believe are bringing a lot of value to a lot of people right now. I think that they may bring some value to some people, but for the vast majority of the world, they're just not right now. And to be fair, neither is DeFi and maybe, I guess, like stablecoins and BTC and ETH, but they're a lot further along that curve than these other use cases are. So if we keep that in mind, then we know what we're building. We know what we know what we're building it for. But like, who are we building it for? Like, who actually needs a store of value like BTC and ETH that they want and that they don't, and that's outside of the control of nation states, and they can self-custody and all that good stuff there? Well, in my opinion, I think everyone on the planet needs that. I don't think that even if you're, it doesn't matter where you are around the world, I think that everyone on the planet has a use for that. The same way I think that everyone on the planet has the use for stablecoins, because everyone on the planet has a use for money, right? For transacting in money. And then you can go to DeFi, and I think the same is true there. Everyone has use for a financial system, whether it's payments, whether it's doing banking-related activities, things like that, right? Everyone has a use for that. So if you kind of take that at face value, then we are building these things for everyone on the planet. It's just that a lot of people, I think, maybe just don't think about these things. Like, I know that a lot of people I know in real life do not think about storing their value in something that isn't a stock, or isn't isn't dollars in a bank account, or isn't like real estate, for example, stuff like that. They're comfortable with that, and that's totally fine. Like, I understand that it's a different calculus for different people, because if you're in an oppressive country or in a third world country, you're probably much more acutely aware of the fact that the currency of your country that you're in may suffer from high inflation or hyperinflation. Your assets may be seized, whether that's by the government or whether that's by kind of mercenary groups, things like that, right? So you're a lot more acutely aware of the fact that your property and your property rights are a lot weaker in those environments than they would be in somewhere like a first world Western nation, for example, right? So that's why I think that those places definitely have been embracing crypto. As I said, South America embracing stablecoins, especially. I mean, those places are also embracing BTC and ETH. I know in Lebanon, BTC is quite popular as well because they love gold as well. Turkey, I think, too. So even though you could consider some of these places, not the ones I just I mentioned necessarily, but like some of these places to be quote unquote first world or developed nations, there is still a need there, just depending on the environment that those people are in, and that's where you're seeing the masses of adoption first. Because if we're realistically looking at what adoption we've seen in these kind of developed nations like the US, like European, Western European nations, like Australia, where I am, for example, really the majority of people are using these things as speculative vehicles, right? Like, they're not using them because they have to. They're using them because they want to, and that's totally fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that at all, and I think that that's a huge upgrade still on the existing system. But when you think about it holistically, and you think about the fact that these networks and what we're building here is for a global audience, we really are targeting the more than half of the world that doesn't live under those conditions, and those people are going to get the most value out of this. So that's what I've mainly been thinking about over the last few months. especially in the face of the fact that people always criticize crypto for not having a use case. I think that that's a very privileged view. I think that's a view that a lot of people, as I said, in like Western nations have, because they just don't see how the people that don't live in Western nations, or don't live in the, the, I guess, like the nice places that we consider to be places that respect property rights, that don't have hyperinflation. A lot of people are just very ignorant to that, and they just don't understand that over half of the world, at least, does not live under those conditions, and they need an alternative here. And I think that the prime example I like to use about how the large parts of the world, they basically skip ahead when it comes to tech. Large parts of the world didn't actually ever have dial-up or broadband. They went straight to mobile, right? They went straight to Wi-Fi. They went straight to cellular networks, because that technology had already matured to that point where it's like, well, these other nations don't need to waste their time with these other things. They can just skip straight to Wi-Fi and cellular networks. And I think the same is true for these nations that don't necessarily have good financial systems or good currencies or anything like that. They can just leapfrog that and go straight into DeFi. They can just use stablecoins. They can just use BTC and ETH as their stores of value, right? And as I said, like, you get to do this in a self-custodial way. You can have your BTC and ETH in your own wallet, and no one can take that from you without forcing you to give it up. And it's not obvious that you even have it to begin with if you just keep it to yourself, because if someone, for example, if you're in a place where, as I said, like property rights aren't enforced that much, or in a place where your chances of getting robbed or anything like that are quite high, if someone comes into your house, they're not going to know that you own crypto, right? Unless you're like openly advertising it. So that's a really good way to keep your wealth secured, because if they come in and they want to steal other wealth that you have, they can see it. But when it comes to crypto, you can securely manage that yourself and self-custody it yourself, and you can bring it with you. If you're trying to escape war-torn countries, things like that, and you're a refugee or something like that, you can bring it with you. I know that may seem crazy to a lot of people listening, because I assume that the majority of the audience of the Daily Gwei is definitely not in that position. Definitely, probably, in Western Europe and the US and places like that. But I think that it's just good to keep in mind that we aren't necessarily building these things for us, so to speak, in terms of who gets the most value out of it. We're building these things for the other half of the world that don't have access to the financial systems that we have access to. They don't have access to other investment vehicles. They don't have access to good currencies like the US dollar, for example. And now they do, because they have stablecoins, right? They have BTC and ETH as their stores of value. They have an alternative financial system. They're able to self-custody these assets. They don't have to rely on banks. They don't have to trust the banks in their country where there may be, high risk of a bank run, stuff like that. So really, when you're looking at just the use cases, that is it to me. Those top three that I talked about earlier, the store of value stuff with BTC and ETH, the stable coins, and then further to that, DeFi built on top of it. Those are the three things that have seen by far the most demand and have by far the best product market fit in crypto. And then you have the long tail of stuff that people are experimenting with right now, which is totally fine. Like, I love seeing the experiments, but I think that people at some point need to understand that a lot of these things will just remain experiments. A lot of them will remain speculative stuff only. They won't add that much fundamental value to people, but they're there. They exist. It's a permissionless network. We're not going to stop anyone from building these sorts of things. But yeah, that's just something that I've thought a lot about lately, and I figured it was worth sharing with you guys there. But anyway, I went overtime here, as I normally do, on that topic. Let's jump into the rest of the news from the last 24 hours. So Parathos shared that the first Goerli shadow fork happened yesterday. You can track along here in this link, which I'll link in the YouTube description below. This shadow fork forked Goerli and enabled the Denkun upgrade. So this is pretty cool, because it didn't shadow fork mainnet, it shadow forked Goerli and enabled Denkun on this shadow fork, and it's been running, I guess, like fine. I mean, I don't see any issues here. I didn't hear about any issues. I don't think Parathos said there were really any issues here. But it is a very small network, as he says here. Denkun is mostly a peer-to-peer heavy upgrade, and such small shadow forks will not give us a realistic view of how the upgrade will affect mainnet. But until we start forking testnets, this gives us the best view of the upgrade. So do keep that in mind, that it is a very limited view of what the upgrade will look like. But it's cool to see that this is happening, and I'm sure there's going to be other shadow forks as time goes on. And on top of that, I'm sure we're going to see, as we get closer to, I guess, the end of the year, probably some real timing around when the Goerli testnet fork will happen, and then from there doing the other testnets, and then obviously eventually mainnet there. But you can go check out this Explorer for the shadow fork. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. Right, Buddha on Twitter, who is the co-founder of the Beacon Chain website, shared an interesting Reddit thread here today from ETHstaker that basically has a user here, Salon FE or Salon Fei, basically detailed the fact that they were able to get better performance out of their solo validators or out of their kind of like validators generally on their boxes by switching from the default NTP servers that Crony uses on Linux to Google's NTP servers here. So if you don't know what that means, you can go check out this post that explains exactly what this is and why this is important here. But basically, he was able, or she was able to inch out a bunch of more performance from their validators and stop missing certain attestations here and there, because you may see that you might miss an attestation, one or two a day as a solo staker, or if you're a rocket pool staker, or anyone running validators, basically. And this apparently is a way to fix that. And there's actually a chart here, or a graph here, showing what this actually looks like before and after. And the reason why this potentially fixes it is because what Crony is, it's basically the timekeeper for your Linux box. And you need to be in sync time-wise with the rest of the network in order to make sure that your attestations are included in time. And if you're out of sync, even for like a minute, and you do an attestation, then obviously it's going to come in too late, and you'll probably miss that attestation because it was just too long. Your validator did not attest in time there. So yeah, you can go check out this post for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. I did change mine on my solo box and my rocket pool box, but we're going to have to see. I only changed it earlier. I'm going to have to see if I get any improvement there. Generally, I don't really have poor performance, though, to be honest. Like, if I'm looking at my validators right now, most of the time it hovers between 98-99% effectiveness. So I will miss an attestation here and there, but I'm not like in particular trying to inch out as much performance as possible, because missing one or two attestations a day is not really going to cause me any pain or any cause for alarm or anything like that, because it's not really much of a loss in terms of reward or anything. So I'm not too concerned. But if you're someone who likes to min-max your validator performance, then this is something you should definitely check out. And as I said, I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, Mark here, who works at Sigma Prime building the Lighthouse consensus layer client, shared today on Twitter that active addresses on Ethereum is at all-time highs if you include rollups. You can define active addresses as a number of unique addresses that sent or received funds on any of Ethereum, Optimism, Arbitrum, zkSync, or Base without double counting addresses that use multiple chains. So that's pretty cool to see, because as I've said plenty of times before, if you're looking at Ethereum usage metrics, you have to count rollups as well. Like, you can't just look at Ethereum layer 1 anymore. You have to look at rollups, because the rollups are what is obviously scaling Ethereum. So just looking at Ethereum layer 1 is not going to give you the full picture here. But in saying that, I have mentioned before, and I think, I still strongly believe this, that a lot of these metrics are not the greatest way to track usage, like active addresses and TPS and transactions per day, those sorts of things. Generally, I don't think that there's much signal there, especially on rollups where it's cheaper to do things, because realistically, a lot of these things are bots, right? And there's nothing wrong with bots, but it depends what the bots are doing. And if you're looking for insight into essentially like how many actual humans are using the chain, these sorts of things aren't going to show you that. And neither is fee revenue, by the way. I know I've said before that I think fee revenue is the best metric we have to show overall usage of the chain, and I still strongly believe that. But if you actually want to get the real numbers of daily active users or weekly active users or monthly active users, maybe we should call them humans, active humans, instead of users. But if you want to get those real numbers, I would say that it's basically impossible with any sort of accuracy, because you have to filter out so many different things. You have to make so many different assumptions. You have to use so many different heuristics. It is basically impossible because everyone on the network's anonymous by default. Like, there's no KYC or anything like that. And even with KYC, it could be gamed and faked there. But in saying that as well, I think that daily active users or weekly active users is probably the wrong way to look at users of a network, simply because those kind of metrics are used in Web 2 because it's used to basically sell ads. Because if you can say that, we have 100 million, weekly active users, you can say to advertisers, well, your pool of potential people that you can advertise to is 100 million, right? And those metrics are also very inflated, by the way, and it's very hard to actually know, who's unique and who's a bot, and they do usually include bots in that because, it makes them look better, but also it's very hard to filter out. But if you're looking at when it comes to like crypto networks, I just don't think that's the best metric to look at, because realistically, like, I'm not a daily active user of Ethereum. Like, I'm not doing a transaction on Ethereum or rollups every single day. Like, I'm a pretty active user, but I'm not doing it every single day, right? So I wouldn't be considered a daily active user, but based on on-chain activity. But if you base it on other things like checking positions on Zappa or on your favorite DeFi protocol, checking the fees that you accrued on in a Uniswap LP pool, checking on your other yield farming activities, checking on NFT prices, stuff like that, then you are an active user of the, I guess, like, Ethereum ecosystem, but you're not putting anything on chain, which means that you're not considered an active on-chain user. So that's why I'm saying it's not the best way to look at things. The better way to look at things is basically to take all these metrics together and then just to try to paint a picture based on them. But still, it's very hard. Like, I honestly don't think we're ever going to get a good way to measure actual humans using the chain. I think that people are always going to debate about what's real versus what's not real. There's going to be a lot of conflicting incentives, because obviously obviously chains that have a lot of, I don't know, active addresses or high TPS, people are going to use that to frame that as a positive. They're going to be like, oh, we got so much TPS. There's so many people using the chain, when in reality, it could just be a few people running a lot of bots using the chain, which it almost always is, because no one is sitting there every day as a human, right? Most people, I shouldn't say no one. There are some people who do this, but most people are not sitting there every day as a human doing hundreds or thousands of transactions on any of these networks. That's just not happening. That's just not realistic, because that's not even what happens in the traditional financial system, right? How many times do you interact with the traditional finance system every day, right? For example, if you're buying something or buying things, like maybe you make like a few online purchases and a few real life purchases a day, you're really just interacting with the payments network 5 to 10 times a day, let's just say, right? And that's maybe a busy day for you. It depends on what type of person you are. Maybe you don't buy things every day. Maybe you only buy them every other day, but you're not interacting with it that much, right? And that's for payments. That's like the number one use case. But then you look at the other things that you do, like taking out a mortgage. You do that once. I mean, for most people, they do that like once or twice in their entire lifetimes, right? And then you look at how often do you pay your rent, right? There's a set date on when you pay that. That's not happening every day either. So, but and that's why I'm saying, like, when it comes to financial systems, looking at active users is just not the right way to go about it. But yeah, anyway, I'm ranting about that now. I've talked a lot about that on the refill before, so I'm sure you guys are sick of hearing me talk about that. But just cool to see this. Cool to see that someone's actually taken not just Ethereum metrics, but rollup metrics and kind of put them together, because that's what I think we should be doing from now on generally. All right, there is a new layer 2 coming to town, and this is a big one. A big one in terms of promises. Reality, we'll have to see how it shakes out here. But the NIL Foundation announced today something called equals NIL, which is a zk rollup that they are claiming scales Ethereum up to 60,000 plus transactions per second through something they're calling zkSharding. And then they continue, it takes modular and monolithic architecture advantages for scaling as it maintains unified liquidity and state while achieving full composability with Ethereum. Now, if you read the thread, it's buzzword bingo, guys. And I've said before that when you see buzzword bingo, you got to be skeptical. I'm not saying that this isn't real. I'm not saying that this isn't something to pay attention to. But when you see this many buzzwords in an announcement, my kind of like spidey senses go off, and I'm just like, okay, zkSharding. There's some buzzwords, right? You got the zk buzzword, you got the sharding buzzword. Modular and monolithic, more buzzwords, right? Unified liquidity, full composability. Like, these are all the things that we hear about all the time. And these are the things that people love to hear about because they're buzzwords, they're marketing terms, they're things that keep people excited, right? It's what riles up the crowd. But if you're looking at it from a fundamentalist perspective, you have to kind of look at, okay, how are they achieving 60,000 TPS? Like, what's the security trade-offs here? Are they storing the data on Ethereum or a layer 1, or are they storing the data off-chain? As it exists today, I don't think you can actually do anywhere near that amount of TPS by storing data on Ethereum layer 1. The capacity is just not there for that. And then, okay, you can go through and see what they're doing here. They're claiming to be able to do parallel transaction execution, which is actually an innovation that Solana has, that I've been saying that we need to essentially get into Ethereum as soon as possible, because it's actually a really big upgrade. So maybe that is how they're achieving it here. They're obviously using zk technology, and they're using sharding as well, so breaking up the kind of transactions here into different shards. But then ultimately, I always go back to, okay, the data availability stuff. Like, where's the data stored? Where are the proofs stored? And they say here, zkSharding provides Ethereum security to its users by saving the primary shards data on Ethereum, using it as a data availability layer. So they've got all these other shards that aren't being stored there. It's just the primary shard that's being stored there. So, okay, what are the trust assumptions there? Like, if the is that data enough to reconstruct the entire state of that layer 2 for users to get their funds back no matter what? Like, is it not relying on any external parties here? And then you just have to ask those kind of questions and things like that. But generally, I'm pretty excited to see this, because if any of their claims hold true here, and if it doesn't require any significant trade-offs in terms of like security and storing data off-chain and stuff like that, then it's pretty cool. But at the same time, like, I don't really like when these things quote TPS figures, because I think like TPS figures are just marketing speak, honestly, because as I've explained to you guys before, there's theoretical TPS and then there's real TPS. Don't tell me you can do 60,000 TPS. Show me you can do 60,000 TPS in a live environment. Don't just show me on testnet. Like, testnets are not where I want to see this. Show me on mainnet. So until a network can show me that it can do that much TPS, real TPS on mainnet, without falling over, without fees, going up to astronomical heights or anything like that, and by processing the transactions as they normally should be processed, I'm going to take it as, okay, you're promising me this. It's just a promise right now. Until you can prove it, I'm not going to believe it. Because I think that there's a kind of thing, and I actually was thinking about this today. Like, and you guys know this. I mean, this is my whole thing around narratives versus reality. It costs literally nothing to spin narratives. And the incentive to spin a narrative is so great in crypto because of the fact that it could potentially pump like your bag, so to speak, right? So the cost to spinning a narrative is zero. The cost to actually delivering a product and delivering the reality that you're promising is infinite, let's say, because Ethereum has made promises, plenty of promises in the past, right? I mean, if you want to look at the promise of proof of stake, Ethereum made that promise since day one. It made that promise since the white paper was published. And then it took until December 2020, which was like, 6 years since the white paper was published, to actually achieve that vision. And that's the exception, not the rule. Most narratives, most stories that are told in crypto are never, ever made reality. And it takes a while for the market to price this in, because the market loves to price in narratives very quickly. But pricing in the reality and basically giving up on that narrative takes a while, especially depending on how hard that narrative is kind of spun, how hard it's pushed, how hard it's shilled, all that sorts of stuff. So just generally, when it comes to narrative versus reality, you just have to look at the cost. The cost of spinning narratives is zero. You can go on Twitter as yourself right now and just start spinning whatever narrative you want. You can go on Reddit, do the same thing, go into Discord channels, you can go on podcast, whatever. But actually delivering the reality, that costs a lot. And I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about like doing the actual work. It's a heavy lift. Whereas spinning a narrative, you're not lifting anything. I mean, let's just say you're doing a squat, right? The squat exercise. Doing your own body weight is spinning a narrative. It's not going to take that much to do it, right? For most people, you can probably do your own body weight. Probably do a few reps of that. Doing like double your body weight, doing triple your body weight, it's not going to happen for people who don't work out if you're just doing it for the first time, right? That's a heavy lift, so to speak, right? And to use the literal term of a heavy lift there. So when you think about it like that, it's just a cost analysis. And that's how I think about these things. So not to take away from the announcement here from the Neil Foundation, but as I've said, I've seen plenty of these announcements before. I've seen lots of promises, lots of these buzzwords. Until things are actually delivered, I'm not going to gush about them. I'm not going to say this is awesome, this is going to change the world, blah, blah, blah. Because I think at this point in my crypto journey, I'm so over the narratives. I'm so past the narratives. I just want to see the realities now. And I want to stick to the realities as much as possible so that I don't mislead anyone, so that I don't make grand promises to anyone, because there's too much narrative spinning in crypto, not enough reality spinning, I guess, so to speak. And I want to be that counterbalance. I want to be the guy who's just talking reality as much as I can and avoiding as many of the narratives as I can, because it's just so tired at this point, and I'm tired of it after being in crypto for so long. But anyway, I'm ranting again, and wow, I'm almost at 30 minutes already. Just a few more things to get through here. So OP Labs officially announced the first post-Bedrock network upgrade today called Canyon. I have spoken about this a bit on the refuel before. But the cool thing about this is that this upgrade is ready to hit the testnets on November 14th. So only under a week from now, the Canyon hard fork will be hitting testnets. And you can read all about it in this blog post. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. I don't know if this upgrade, as it exists now, includes the changes that are coming with Denkun. I think it just includes the changes that were included in Shanghai and Kampala, which was the withdrawals fork in April, but I believe they're going to do an upgrade to support Denkun at some point as well, as I've discussed before. But anyway, you can check this out. I'll link this in the YouTube description below. Moving on, last bit of L2 news here today was a project that I came across, something called Witness Chain. So they've introduced something called the Witness Chain Watchtower Network, which they're calling the first line of defense for rollups. Basically, what this is a network that ensures secure L2 growth by deriving cryptoeconomic security from Eigenlayer. So, I've talked about how with Eigenlayer you can build things like Oracle networks, data availability networks. Well, you can also build Watchtower networks that basically allows different nodes in the network to raise alarms about disputes in optimistic rollups, for example, where if they see that there's a fraud dispute, they can raise the alarm and say, okay, well, people need to look at this, and the fraud dispute game needs to be played here, and then you can do this in this decentralized and distributed way and not just rely on one person watching it. Because if you just rely on one person watching it or one team watching it, that's a point of failure. So you want to obviously create a network around this to create a network of people that are all watching it. And it's kind of that thing of who watches the watchers, right? Or who watches the roll-ups, who watches the optimistic roll-ups. Well, this is what Witness Chain is creating here. So very cool new project here, leveraging Eigenlayer. You can check this out for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, just wanted to give a quick shout out here to the Ethereum.org effort. I was asked in the Discord channel to shout out to shout out the Ethereum.org Discord channel. If you go to their website and basically scroll down to the bottom here, I believe the link is at the bottom. But you know what? I'm also going to link this in the YouTube notes below, and you can check that out there. But yeah, if you want to get involved with Ethereum.org, just talk to like-minded people, the Ethereum.org Discord channel is great. You can go check that out there. But also the Daily Gwei Discord channel, of course, as well, if you want to check that out. But I just wanted to shout out that one there. And last up here, it was great today. I actually went and recorded an in-person podcast with the guys over at Collective Shift. So you can see here Ben, Berg, and Matt from Collective Shift. We're all in like a kind of studio here, recording studio here. We recorded for about an hour and a half, I think, talking all things crypto, Ethereum, investing, all that good stuff. And that one will be going live Tuesday next week. So Tuesday, actually, Australian time. Next week, I'll be sure to link that for you guys in the Discord channel and highlight it on the Refuel as well next week. But yeah, the reason why I wanted to shout this out as well is because it's just so fun having in-person conversations, guys. Like, I've been talking to my friends about this a lot recently, about how we are always so online that we forget just how good it is to have just a face-to-face conversation with people about crypto. Like, sure, we have face-to-face conversations with people in our real life about non-crypto things, and that's all well and good. But the majority of our conversations, at least for me, is about crypto is online. Like 99% of it is online. And then when you go and have a conversation in real life with about crypto with someone, it's just so different. It's so much friendlier, it's so much more constructive. You can have a nuanced conversation. You can agree and disagree with each other without shitting on each other, without throwing crap at each other, without other people piling in and it becoming a spectacle. You can just have great conversations. And I think, as I've said before, I want to keep doing more of this, like so much more of this, because it just offsets the crap that I think, myself and a lot of you probably deal with seeing every day on places like Twitter and other public spaces where people are definitely not acting like rational people. They're definitely acting irrationally, acting as a kind of like, just pump my bags, guys, kind of mentality there. But yeah, anyway, that episode will drop Tuesday. I'll link it in the Refuel when it does. But I think on that note, that's going to be it for today's episode. So thank you everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks everyone.